Something is happening to your life right now that you did not ask for. Not a rough patch, not a bad season. The actual structure of the life you built, the one you planned, the one you performed, the one you protected is coming apart. Not slowly, all at once. And the strangest part is not the pain. The strangest part is how familiar it already feels. Like some part of you always knew this moment was coming. This has already been happening. You just did not have the words for it yet. And something in you is already beginning to shift. If this video is finding you right now, stay with it. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Because in the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through 9 signs that the universe is not destroying your life. It is rebuilding it. Stay until sign number 7. That is the one most people find impossible to explain away. And the final one changes everything. Sign 1. The ground turned to liquid. You have been through hard times before. You know what a storm feels like. The kind where you lower your head, hold on, and wait for the weather to clear. This is not that. This feels like the earth itself has dissolved beneath your feet. There is nothing to brace against, nothing to hold on to. Because the thing that collapsed was not just a job or a relationship or a plan. Everything collapsed at once. Most people assume this means something went terribly wrong. It does not. The collapse is the clearing. Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte spent decades studying what happens to people after catastrophic life disruption. Their research on post-traumatic growth found that the most profound personal transformation does not happen despite total collapse. It happens because of it. The simultaneous failure of multiple systems is not a sign that your life is broken. It is a sign that a version of your life that could no longer hold you has finally let go. What this means for you is that the terrifying feeling of having no solid surface left to stand on is not the end of the story. It is the exact moment the old story stops being able to contain you. The ground liquefied because you had outgrown the ground. Sign 2. The small things disappeared first. Before anything obvious fell apart, something quieter happened. The morning routine stopped. The small rituals that had anchored your days for years simply dissolved. You stopped making the bed. You forgot to eat at the right times. The inbox went unanswered. And the people you had kept close out of habit, out of proximity, out of mutual convenience, they quietly faded. Most people assume this is a symptom of falling apart. It is not. It is the body sorting what is real. Erik Erikson and later James Marcia in their foundational work on identity formation identified that during periods of major life disruption, the psyche instinctively begins to release structures that were held together by external pressure rather than internal truth. The rituals that disappear first are the ones that were never truly yours. The relationships that evaporate were already hollow. Your system is not malfunctioning. It is being selective in a way your conscious mind never had the courage to be. What this means for you is that every small thing that has quietly vanished was making room. Not absence. Excavation. The space it left behind is not emptiness. It is new architecture. But what comes next is the pattern most people never identify. Sign 3. You stopped recognizing yourself. You look in the mirror and something is different. It is not just tiredness. It is the eyes. The warmth that used to live there has been replaced by something quieter and harder. You have become careful in a way you were not before. Guarded. The person who used to walk into a room and make people feel at ease now watches from a corner. The person who used to laugh easily now calculates before speaking. Most people assume something was broken inside them. It was not. The armor fell, and new armor grew. This is what identity rupture actually looks like from the inside. Erikson's framework described the psyche moving through periods of crisis and consolidation, where old self-concepts dissolve and a more durable, more honest self begins to assemble from what remains. The loss of warmth, the hollow eyes, the hypervigilance. These are not signs of permanent damage. They are signs of a self in transition, still raw, still forming, not yet finished. What this means for you is that the version of you who looked easy and open and unguarded was performing safety you no longer felt. What you see in the mirror now is not a broken person. It is an honest one. The softness will return, but it will be earned, not assumed. Sign 4. You saw the warning signs and could not stop. Before the collapse, something was already signaling. You were working harder than you had ever worked, and feeling less than you had ever felt. You were smiling in the right places and feeling nothing behind the smile. You could not focus. Simple decisions felt enormous. And underneath all of it, a quiet voice that you kept burying under more productivity, more planning, more performance, was saying, I cannot keep pretending to live this life. Most people assume they should have done something sooner. They could not have. The system had to complete its failure. David Blanchflower's research at Dartmouth on the shape of human well-being across a lifetime found that unhappiness tends to accumulate in a slow, invisible arc before it reaches its lowest point, not because people are weak, but because the mechanisms humans use to sustain themselves under pressure are extraordinarily powerful. The overcompensation, the mental overload, the resentment that built without a name, these were not personal failures. They were signs of a person holding something together far past the point it could be held. What this means for you is that you were not blind. You were not weak. You were carrying something that was always going to fall. And the fall was always going to be the relief. Sign 5. You thought you had hit the bottom. You had not. There is a version of collapse that the internet loves to tell. The rock bottom moment. The dark night of the soul. The single worst day, after which everything begins to rise. You believed in that story because you needed to believe in it. And then you discovered the truth that no one warns you about. Rock bottom is not a floor. It is a swamp. Most people assume recovery is a moment. It is not. It is months of moving through mud. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. He was describing not a single moment of ignition, but a sustained process. The long, unglamorous work of continuing to move when there is nothing to move toward yet. The swamp is not a detour. It is where the actual transformation happens. Invisible to everyone around you. Deeply real to no one but you. Day after day of dragging yourself forward with no evidence that it is working. What this means for you is that if you are still in the swamp, you are not behind. You are not failing at recovery. You are doing the hardest and most necessary part of it. The people who eventually emerge are not the ones who found a shortcut. They are the ones who kept moving in the dark. But what comes next is the pattern most people never identify. Because it is the one that should not be able to happen at all. Sign 6. The universe gave you the wrong comfort at the right moment. Someone said something to you, maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe something you read at 3 in the morning. That was almost exactly wrong and somehow exactly what you needed. Not the real answer. Not the truth. But a sentence that kept you breathing for one more day. A coincidence that arrived at an impossible moment. A door that opened from the wrong direction. Most people assume this was luck. It was not. It was timing so precise it defies probability. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called synchronicity, the phenomenon of meaningful coincidences that emerge during periods of profound psychological transition. Jung observed that as the old identity structure dissolves, the psyche becomes extraordinarily receptive to information it would have filtered out before. The right book appears because you are finally able to see it. The right person arrives because you have finally stopped performing the version of yourself that would have pushed them away. The comfort that found you was not random. It was the result of a self that had finally become porous enough to receive it. What this means for you is that the things that have been finding you in the dark, the unexpected conversations, the strange coincidences, the moments of inexplicable calm, are not accidents. They are the universe's reply to a question your collapse has been asking. Sign 7. Your body knew before your mind admitted it. There is a weight in your chest that does not move. Not grief exactly. Not quite fear. Something heavier and older than both. It sits on your sternum and makes full breaths feel like something you have to reach for. And in your stomach, every morning, before full consciousness arrives, there is a drop, that nauseating plummet of waking back into the reality you cannot yet escape. A metallic taste. A tremor of dread. The cortisol spike that floods your limbs before you have even opened your eyes. Most people assume the body is suffering. It is also recording. The body is keeping the archive. Research on the physiological dimensions of identity collapse shows that the nervous system encodes major psychological transitions as physical experience, which is why the chest and stomach carry the weight that the mind cannot yet fully process. The pressure, the nausea, the suffocation feeling. These are not signs that something is wrong with your body. They are signs that your body is doing what bodies have always done during profound change. holding the experience with a completeness that the mind, still in survival mode, cannot yet afford. What this means for you is that the physical weight you are carrying is not just pain. It is evidence. Proof that something real is happening. Proof that this is not in your head. Your body is not failing you. It is being faithful to what this actually is. But what comes next is the sign most people find hardest to explain away. Because this one does not just happen around you. This one happens through you. Sign 8. You started creating from a place you did not know existed. At some point in the swamp, not at the beginning, not when you expected, something began to move in a direction that did not make sense. Not productivity. Not recovery. Something older and stranger. A need to make something. To write something. To say something out loud that you had never had the exact words for before. Not because it would help. Not because anyone was waiting for it. But because the old identity that had organized your life around performance and approval had finally run out of instructions, and what was left underneath it was something raw and honest and, for the first time, completely yours. Most people assume this is distraction. It is not. This is the original signal returning. Tedeschi and Calhoun's post-traumatic growth research documented this consistently, that among the most reliable signs of genuine growth after collapse is the emergence of new possibilities that were invisible before the crisis. Not versions of the old life reassembled. Entirely new directions, new voices, new capacities that the previous identity structure had been quietly suppressing for years. The creative spark that appears in the void is not a coping mechanism. It is the authentic self making its first unguarded statement. What this means for you is that whatever has been quietly pulling at you, the thing you have been doing not because it makes sense but because you cannot stop, is not a symptom of your collapse. It is the first sentence of what comes after. Sign 9. You finally stopped being able to explain it away. You have tried every rational framework. Random chance, poor decisions, bad timing, the logical consequence of choices that compounded until the structure gave. And the logical frameworks are not wrong exactly. A skeptic looking at your life from the outside could construct a coherent, cold explanation for every domino that fell. What the skeptic cannot explain is what happened next. The surge of quiet resolve that appeared from nowhere on the day you had genuinely given up. The strange precision of what arrived in the exact moment you stopped holding on to the old identity. The way that the collapse, seen from inside it, feels less like destruction and less like punishment, and more like a process that was always going somewhere. Most people assume this feeling is wishful thinking. It is not. It is pattern recognition. Human beings are the only species that does not just endure catastrophe. They build meaning from it, and that meaning changes what they become. The skeptic is right that the universe has no interest in your specific suffering. But the research on post-traumatic growth, on identity reconstruction, on the U-shaped curve of human well-being, all of it points to the same conclusion. Something consistently happens to humans after total collapse that cannot be fully explained by probability or rational analysis alone. People do not just survive. They reorganize at a higher level of authenticity than was available to them before. What this means for you is that the thing you have been sensing underneath all of it, the strange, persistent feeling that this is going somewhere, is not denial. It is the one honest thing your situation has been trying to show you all along. There is something I want to say to you directly. I know what the worst moment felt like. Not the dramatic one, the quiet one. The one where you were sitting somewhere ordinary. A kitchen, a parking lot, the edge of a bed, and you understood, with a completeness that was almost peaceful, that the life you had built no longer existed. That the person you had spent years becoming had dissolved. That there was nothing left to perform and nowhere left to hide and no plan that could reach from where you were to anywhere that made sense. And I know that in that moment or in the days around it, someone told you that everything happens for a reason. And I know what it felt like to receive that. The way it landed wrong. The way it asked you to locate a lesson in something that felt like pure loss. The way it required you to be grateful for something that was destroying you. You were right to feel what you felt. You were right to reject the easy comfort. You were right to stay in the truth of how bad it actually was. Because the comfort that serves you is not the one that makes the darkness smaller. It is the one that tells you the truth about what the darkness is doing. And here is the truth. What the universe is actually doing when your life falls apart is making room for a version of you that the old life was never going to have the courage to become. You were not being punished. You were being prepared. Not in a clean or comfortable way. Not on a schedule that makes sense from inside the swamp, but with a precision that you will eventually be able to look back on and recognize. The question I want to leave you with is this, and I want you to answer it in the comments, because your story matters and someone needs to read it. What is the one thing that appeared in your life only after the collapse? A person, a realization, a direction, a version of yourself that could never have arrived while the old life was still standing. Tell me below, because that answer is not just your story. It is the proof.